Do I need to do this?
Oh yeah, I would put the headphone on so you can hear the callers, if that's all right. If
Sure.
you're comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And do you mind the video here?
No.
So slowly fade it down halfway, Welcome back to the WMNF News and Talk at Noon. My name is Sean Kinane, and today we're going to talk about the Hillsborough County ferry possibilities. And the number to call in is 813-239-9663. We'd like to take your calls. You can also email us at dj@wmnf.org. You can send a text to 813-433-0885. And joining me in the studio is former Hillsborough County Commissioner Ed Turanchik. Welcome, Ed.
Thank you.
And we also have on the phone Mark Fernandez with HMS Ferries. He's joining us on the phone from Jacksonville. Hi, Mark. All right, do we have you now, Mark? Thanks so much for joining us. Well, let me begin by asking Ed Turanchik, tell us what's some background about this ferry. What if it does come to the area, what would it be like?
Sure. First of all, this has been a long desired, never been able to achieve idea. People in the Bay Area look around to San Francisco and Seattle, New York, Sydney, and say, what on earth, why don't we have this here? The impetus really for this thing, well, here's what would happen. If all the stars align, starting in 2018, there would be ferry service running from South Hillsborough County to MacDill Air Force Base as a commuter service on work days. It would run every 15 minutes or so from a location in South County, which we think will be Schultz Preserve, to MacDill Air Force Base, and it can take this commuter service going back and forth had the capacity to take around up to 2,400 people off the roads every morning and every evening. And so that's really the principal concept that is based upon the very large number of MacDill employees who live in South County, over 8,000, who have, they drive between 25 and 50 miles a day going from South County to MacDill, and the trip across the bay is around 6 to 7 miles. The secondary market here would be the possibility when the market demand is there and facilities exist to provide for off-peak service between the two downtowns in South County for events and those sorts of things. But
when you say this two downtowns, you're talking about Tampa and St. Pete.
Between downtown Tampa and downtown St. Petersburg. That's going to be contingent upon those places having facilities in place and there being a market demand for that service in one fashion or not. So, the mayor in St. Petersburg is a big proponent of this, as is the city council. They want the people in taking the polls on the pier plan and whatnot have said they want water taxi and ferry service. In Jeff Vinnick's plans, they've talked about the need and desire of using water transportation to connect to it. So you have a gathering storm, if you will, or the stars are starting to align, where we can start having the kind of very cost-effective, congestion-proof, elegant, and wonderful water transportation system that other communities around bays do. And we're very fortunate, and Mark Fernandez is on the phone today, at HMS Ferries has seen the potential of here and is willing to bring their expertise here and take some operating risk to stand up the commuter service and bring this really incredibly cool option to the Tampa Bay area.
If you're just joining us, that voice is Ed Turanchik. He's a former Hillsborough County Commissioner. We're talking now about the potential ferry service in Hillsborough County and maybe beyond. 813-239-9663 or dj@wmnf.org. You can also text us a question at 813-433-0885. It's 12:22 in the afternoon. You're listening to 88.5 FM WMNF Tampa. And that brings me to Mark Fernandez with HMS Ferries. What would the role of your company be, Mark, in this project?
went through a due diligence process and working with Ed and MacDill in the county and identifying ridership opportunities and so forth. So after pretty exhaustive consultation process and due diligence process, we came to the conclusion that Tampa Bay was certainly right for seaborne water transportation for ferry operation. We think that there's the potential for a long-term growth on the water in transportation. So we chose to work with Ed and the county in helping to stand up a project here. Our area of responsibility would be to manage all maritime operations, that being the vessels, crewing, maintenance, all operations relevant to the ferry project itself. And this is one project we felt strongly enough about to actually take on the operating risk for the first few years, to where all the operating expense will be on us rather than the county has to seek subsidies from some taxes or government agency.
Mark, you mentioned the operating risk that you might take on. About what have you estimated it will cost your company? And then the follow-up to that question will be, where would you get the revenues to balance that?
Well, a projection for the first 3 years is upwards of $10 million in operating costs. Certainly, we would hope that much of that or part of that will be offset by the revenue generated from ticket sales. What we foresee is after about 3 years, we should be in pretty much a break-even situation, and hopefully be in the black by then, and be able to start looking at a future of getting some return on their investment.
So Ed Turanchik, the company, HMS Ferries, would take on the operating costs. What would taxpayers be responsible for? I think at least purchasing the boats?
Well, it'd be for the capital cost of the project. I think listeners need to understand this is a transit project. Like any transportation project, the role of the public sector is to build stuff, right? And in the highways, they provide 100% of the cost. Sometimes that gets offset by toll revenues. Typical transit operation, for every $4 of expenses, you get $1 back, and you have to pay 100% of the capital cost. So this is pretty extraordinary that you're standing up a transit operation in the state of Florida that doesn't require state or local operating subsidies. In this case, the public would be responsible for the capital assets, the boats, the trams, the facilities. But a lot of those things have liquidation value too. If things don't turn out 5-10 years from now, you can sell off the boats, sell off the trams. And if you put the ferry terminal in the right spot, which we think is Schultz Park, you get a really nice waterfront recreation park. So your investment of that is good for a lot of different reasons, for ecotourism, for parks and recreation. So I think it's the very low risk nature of this project, coupled with the very high returns on investment, is what has brought together a really diverse group of businesses and conservative and liberal and environmental people all saying, hey, this really is smart to do. We were really happy that last week the county commission voted unanimously to say, yeah, we got a lot of work to do on this yet, but let's set a goal of opening this up in 2018. And the county's already pledged close to $8 million to the federal government. We've got $5.3 million from the federal government. The state of Florida's practice is to match the county's dollar amount on a one-for-one basis. So you add those numbers up, we're at around $21 million of funding between different sources. You probably can get other funds from other places. The operating dollar subsidy is not here, doesn't exist here, because of HMS extraordinary commitment and faith in our community, actually. So this project is really teeing up nicely, and if we just work diligently and the community says let's get on with it, I think it's a pretty realistic scenario to see ferry service starting here in the calendar year 2018. I'm not saying in January. I just, that the stars have to align.
So 3 to 4 years from now. You mentioned that 15 minutes would be the interval where the ferries would go. That means you need multiple ferries. About how many ferries would that be that that the county would have to purchase? And with all the capital outlay, is the $21 million enough?
No, the project budget right now stands at 25, and that's subject to what the final site is. It's the Schultz site is important from the standpoint of the project, is because it is the closest one to MacDill, with the lowest ecological impacts and the greatest environmental benefits. Other sites would have considerably longer travel times and far greater ecological impacts. So the budget for this is really based upon being located at Schultz, but part of that budget is also road access into Schultz, which doesn't have a roadway into it. Schultz was always intended to have a recreational park in it. I actually made the motion when I was on the county commission to buy Schultz 20 years ago. But because of the recession and 911 issues, the road access got eliminated. So part of that budget is to create a recreational park there that you'll spend $2 to $4 million doing that no matter what. The plan currently calls for 3 smaller boats, between 149 and 200 passenger vessels that would just bounce back and forth between Schultz and MacDill. HMS estimates that that you might have boats be able to leave every 15 minutes, but again, and Mark can address that, it's subject to, further evaluations and operating permit conditions and all those sorts of things.
So let me ask Mark. Mark, if there are boats that leave from Schultz and go to MacDill, how long does that take, and is 3 boats the right number?
Running about every 15 minutes to, I'd say on the outside, maybe 20 minutes. So the longest somebody would have when they arrive at the terminal would be a 15 or maybe a 15-minute wait.
813-239-9663 if you'd like to join this conversation with Mark Fernandez of HMS Ferries. He's joining us on the phone from Jacksonville, and Ed Turanchik is here in our studio. You can also send us a text to 813-433-0885 or email us at dj@wmnf.org. And we have a question about docking. The question comes from Dan in cyberspace. He says, how adaptable are the ferries to docking at ports other than the designated docks? Can the boats dock at other facilities? Maybe I should ask Mark that question.
For transit operations, that's actually a very good question. For the scheduled transit operations to MacDill, we want to obviously optimize throughput and turnaround, which is why we're able to get those 15-minute windows. So the vessel would be designed to be front loading, so it would pull up straight into a dock. We have large doors that people disembark, and primarily the majority of the passengers would be disembarking off of one level, so you don't have a lot of stairways and that. You're able to move a lot of people that way. Optimally, any other dockage should be following, but the vessels are able to side load, but it would greatly restrict the flow. So if it's a transit operation where the volume is really important, you definitely would need to be bow in. But broadside, we would have a little, limited.
I'm probably going to run the
it would
cut.
Be more adaptable to a standard marge system.
The Mariella. We've talked a lot about the Schultz Preserve as one of the points where the ferry would dock in the South County area. And when this was first proposed, there were environmentalists that said this could be an environmental problem to have a ferry terminal in this preserve. But last Wednesday, during the Hillsborough County Commission, an environmentalist, Mariella Smith, got up before the commission, and she said that it wasn't going to be as much of an environmental problem as suspected. Let's hear what Mariella Smith said to the Hillsborough County Commission last Wednesday.
The original plan included a road, picnic shelters, and more. We are pleased that the ferry plan will finally realize those goals and allow public access to this park. The ferry project furthers ELAP's mission by providing additional conservation land that is larger and much more ecologically valuable than the footprint of the ferry facilities. Importantly, all the land involved will remain.
So at Turanchik, have the environmental issues been cleared up for this?
Well, I think we were going, when we entered the public-private partnership agreement almost a year ago, we specified Schultz. Last August, Audubon raised concerns and objections about that, even though the Audubon bird sanctuary person suggested Schultz to us. By the way, people with the port suggested Schultz to us, as well as some folks with Mosaic. We understand this is really kind of a policy issue, more or less. The question is, under what circumstances could you make use of lands that were acquired for ostensibly environmental purposes for something other than just a passive use? This is not a typical ELAP property. ELAP is the Environmental Lands Acquisition Program. This property is actually owned by the Water Management District. It is all man-made. It didn't exist prior to 1968, so they dredged up Bay Bottom, created this peninsula for industrial port. And about 10 years ago, they did a restoration plan where they dug up some of the uplands and created wetlands, and then put more fill on the far western edge of this peninsula, which is the area that we are proposing to use. So as part of this program also, we have proposed to bring in 46 acres of ELAP-nominated lands that would connect Schultz to the Golden Aster Scrub, creating this greenway connection and wildlife corridor from an estuarine habitat to a xeric habitat that's the Golden Aster Scrub. So, I think at the Sierra Club General Meeting a couple months ago, Charles Lee and one or two other people said they don't like it's a policy issue. They don't like the policy consequences of this. And, I'll put it directly. If we can make use of 20 acres of twice deposited spoils for a transformational premium transit project, keeping that land in the public domain, turning it into a waterfront recreational park, adding 46 acres of ecologically important land that has been nominated for acquisition by ELAP, take thousands of cars off the road, reduce nitrous oxide pollution by 15 tons a year, and nitrous oxide is the micronutrient that we're trying to reduce in the bay because that's what causes eutrophication and seagrass destruction, and also take out 6,000 tons of CO2 emissions every year. That's a trade I would do every day of the year. It's not like there's a lot of sites out there. And Charles say, well, that doesn't mean we can go and put solar panels on all the environmental lands. Well, this is a silly argument. Between Pendola Point and Apollo Beach, there's not a site that isn't next to a major industrial area or an environmental area. So we have picked the one location that has the greatest community benefit, the greatest environmental benefit, that can allow the service to have the best service and has the lowest ecological impacts. Having said that, there's going to be a process in the next few months to go back and quantify all that and understand all those issues. But we aren't here 2 years into the process, having spent a lot of time and energy without understanding all the options. And some people who really don't know those as well are suggesting things, and we're fine by that. But at the end of the day, I am a strong environmentalist. I do think you need to think globally and act locally. And one of the Sierra Club adages is don't be an environmental NIMBY, right?